Thank you, Brett. That is awesome. You guys, I wish Dr. Stubbs was always with me, referring to us as Jordan and Pippin. I love it. So today we're going to be talking about our household spending plan, and we all know another word for a household spending plan, which is a budget. But I'll tell you guys, my wife hates that word budget. She feels like a budget is confining and somebody telling her she can't do something. And what's human nature when somebody tells us we can't do something? We're bound and determined to do it anyway. So, as Brett said, I'm Richard with Consumer Credit Counseling Service. Today, we're going to go through the steps of a household spending plan. But I want to turn it over first to the brilliant Catherine Hubbard to walk you through some of the housekeeping issues.
All right. Hi, everybody. We're super excited to have you here. I've already been interacting with some of you guys in the chat box. I'm glad you guys were able to see that. You guys will also have the option to raise your hand at the bottom. So during the session, Richard might say, hey, guys, if you've ever done X, please raise your hand. So you guys can go ahead and try practicing that down at the bottom, and we'll see where it pops up, makes a fun little ding sound for Richard to know who's answering him. Perfect. Thank you. And then afterwards, you'll also see there's a content one where you can go through, and we've shared some files where you can see a copy of the presentation and some of the different budgeting trackers and daily spending trackers that we have to share with you guys today. And I'll be in the chat box, so as you guys have questions, feel free to put them in there. If Richard doesn't get to them during the session, we do have at the end, we've got time for the questions that we'll do in our parking lot. So I promise I'll be keeping track of all of your wonderful questions, and we'll be answering all of them at the end if we don't answer them during. And we'll be doing some polling, not as a quizzing you, but just to keep everybody interactive because we can't see all of your beautiful faces.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Catherine. And just a quick reminder, if you were not able to make the credit workshop last week but want to get that, Dr. Stubbs can give you that recording. We're really excited today to talk to you about creating a household spending plan. And really, there are four pieces to this. Now, we could make it really dry and boring and just say, write down your income every month and write down your expenses and subtract the two, and there's your budget. But there's really more to it than that. And we always want people to start with their goals. What are they trying to achieve? Why have a spending plan in the first place? So we want you to think about what are you trying to accomplish? What are some things you want to purchase in your life or achieve financially? So today I'm going to walk you through how to do a SMART goal. And many of you may have done the SMART goal exercise with different parts of your life, but not many people have done it with their finances. So we want to start there. Then we're going to give you the two pieces to a spending plan, and Catherine already put in some great tips, and I'm going to walk you through how to put in your income and expenses and the different type of expenses you'll run across and the pros and cons of each. Then we'll talk about savings. Probably in today's world, the hardest thing any of us can do is save money. A study came out a few years ago that 40% of Americans couldn't come up with $400 if we had an emergency. And so talking to folks and trying to build in that cushion of savings is really difficult, but we're going to give you some tips to help you today. And then finally, we're going to deal with the four-letter word, that's right, debt. And so we're going to give you some tips, whether it's student loan debt, credit card debt, or medical bills, of some tips and strategies you may want to take. So let's dive right in. Go ahead and raise your hand if this seems like a good agenda for today. We'll practice this interactive. Oh, I'm already seeing a hand raise. This is great. This is an interactive webinar. This is not one of those you can be texting your friends during, unless you're getting them to join the webinar while we talk. So awesome. It looks like we've got some hands up. Let's dive in with this idea of SMART goals. And before I do, I'd like everybody to type into the chat box. When I say financial goals, give me examples of things that come to mind, things that you want to achieve financially in your life. So I'll give everybody a second to think about that and just type in the chat box one or two or three ideas of things you want to purchase in your life, and we'll get Catherine to kind of read them out to us as we go. So let's give everybody a second to type in at least one or two goals that they may have that they want to achieve financially.
Perfect. So our first one is debt-free, which we love hearing.
You bet. You bet. That what Brent was talking about at the beginning, coming into our office and seeing all the cut up credit cards, we call that plastic surgery. So I definitely relate to the debt-free idea. What else? What other ideas do you have? things that you may want to achieve financially in your life.
We've got home buying on there, so next week would be a really great one.
You bet. Next week, we're just going to do a quick introduction to home buying, how to get started, an overview, and some steps to take to get you in a good position. So absolutely, home buying is a big one.
And then we have retire early and pension covered.
Awesome. I love that. Retirement, the one thing we can't borrow to do is retire. So saving for it is really important.
Having 6 months of saving just in case something unwonderful happens. I like
Ah,
unwonderful. I like that word.
unwonderful. And thank you for the truth bomb, right? In times like these, we're reminded of trying to have some type of an emergency fund or cushion or sleeping better at night fund. It's not raining today right now where I am, but rainy day funds are always important. So you guys, those are fantastic financial goals, and you probably have a ton of them. And what we want to do is take those financial goals and make sure they're smart. So we want to make sure they're S is for specific, M is for measurable, A is for actionable, R is for realistic, and T is for time frame. So I'm going to walk you through step by step an example financial goal, but I want to define it first. So specific, we want to be as specific about this goal as possible. What do I mean by that? The number one thing that people usually respond with is, I want to save money. And saving money is the greatest thing since sliced bread, but it's not a very specific financial goal. So technically, I could drop pennies in a jar for a year and I'm saving money, but I haven't achieved anything or gotten toward closer to any goal that I might have. So we want to be as specific as possible. Measurable. This is really easy when it comes to a financial goal. This is the dollar amount you need in order to achieve that goal. So somebody said, buy a house. Well, for most of us, paying cash for a house is not realistic, right? So we're going to have to borrow a big chunk of that change. But when it comes to the SMART goal, the measurable amount is how much actual dollar amount, what's the dollar amount I need to save in order to achieve that goal? Actionable, what's my next step? And it may take 10 steps to get me towards the goal of, like somebody said, retirement. It may be a long time and a lot of steps I need to take to get there. I don't need to write out all my steps. I need to figure out what's my next step, and that will get me closer to it. Realistic, who gets to decide if our financial goals are realistic? We do. And so it's really important that you share this financial goal with your support system, with people that are important to you in your life, that are your cheerleaders, and write it down. Put it somewhere you see every single day. And then time frame. We want to focus on the short-term goal first. And the short-term goals tend to be things that we want to accomplish in the next year. So we start with that one goal, and then once we've achieved it, we realize that this stuff works and we can have some possible momentum behind it. So let me walk you through an example. You can see the little green VW Bug up there. Let's say that I want to buy a car. That could be a financial goal. So the way we would go through this, and the SMART goal exercise is available for you to download and write out. And this is going to be your homework assignments. Write this out and put it somewhere that you see every single day. So what exactly do you want to achieve? And it's very targeted, right? So I might say, I'm going to use buy a car as my goal. Well, buy a car is pretty specific. I know when I've achieved it. But how can I make that more specific? Well, what's the make, the model, the year? What color is that car? What special features does it have in it? I want to list as many details as possible so I can really visualize that goal and make it happen. The more specific it can be, the more likely I am to achieve it. Measurable. I am not going to be able to, let's say that new VW, let's say it's a 2016 green VW Bug. Catherine took that picture out, so we're going to put that in there. So that goal is very specific. I want it to have less than 80,000 miles on it and have leather interior. How much do I think that's going to take? Well, I might not be exactly sure right now, but maybe I can guess $8,000, $10,000. And maybe I don't have that much cash lying around, but I want to put down $2,000 towards this car and borrow the rest. So my measurable amount is going to be $2,000. That's how much of my own money do I need to save to get this goal. Action steps. What action steps can I take to get me closer to start saving that $2,000? It might be get a job. It might be get a higher paying job. It might be get a second job. It might be finish my degree at Savannah Tech so I can get closer to that goal. It might be start saving money. Open a savings account specifically labeled towards my car fund. It might be direct depositing into that account. It might be to stop pulling money out of that account. So I need to choose one of those steps. So let's say for me, it's to finish my degree at Savannah Tech since they've been nice enough to host this workshop. Realistic. That one's very straightforward. I get to circle yes or no, and if it's not, I need to make some changes to that goal. If it is, I want to write it down, put it somewhere I can see, maybe screenshot that little VW bug and put it on my screensaver on my computer, put it on the cell phone screensaver, remind myself daily that that's what I'm working for and trying to achieve. And then time frame, how much time did I give you to achieve that short-term goal? A year, 12 months. So this time next year, I want to have that goal achieved. If you have any questions about the SMART goal exercise, type them into the box. We'll put them in the parking lot, and I'll address them at the end. But we really encourage you to start with this fun SMART goal exercise that you can download and do right from the chat box. So we've got a poll question for everybody, and you're just going to type in your answer, A, B, C, or D, into the chat box. If you don't know it, just guess. There's no right or wrong here. We're not scoring it. When you create a spending plan, which income should you choose? Is it A, your gross income, B, your hourly wage, C, your net income, or D, your salary? Sorry, there is a right answer here, but we are not testing you on it or not grading you on it, I should say. So we'll give everybody a chance, read the question and type in A, B, C, or D into the chat box. And if you don't know, just guess.
Perfect. And we have our polling working today, so the poll should have actually popped up on your screen. And if it hasn't, feel free to put it in the chat box, and we'd love that too. But hopefully it looks like we have people coming in. We've got right now in the lead, we've got net income coming in first with gross income behind it. And so we'll give people another couple seconds to answer, and then we'll let Richard reveal the answer to us.
Perfect. Thank you, Catherine. I'm loving that polling technology is working. Good. And if it didn't work for you, go ahead and type it in the box. But if it does, please click on what you think the right answer is, and we'll see if we get it.
Alrighty, Richard, it looks like we've got all of our answers, so I'm going to show them their responses so people can see how everyone answered and stop the polling for us. So you're welcome to share it when you're ready.
Awesome. Drum roll, please. Brrr, the right answer is, believe it or not, net income. And it looks like a lot of folks said that. The way to think about net income, a lot of us call it take-home pay, bring-home pay. It's really what we're left over with after taxes, insurance, retirement, any other benefits that are coming out for us. We really want to focus on our net income. Next week, we'll talk about our gross income because that's what lenders look at when we buy a house. But when we're doing our monthly budget or spending plan, we really want to focus on our net because that's what we have to work with every month. So hopefully everybody does, when they get income, they do direct deposit. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. It comes in there faster. You don't have to go anywhere to get it. Your money's just in your account immediately. The problem that we've seen and continue to see is with direct deposit, folks forget to look at their pay stub. And I'm not saying where you work or where you get income from makes a ton of payroll mistakes, but do you think it's ever happened in the history of that organization? Probably. And you want to catch it to make sure it's not happening to you and that everything's accurate. So the first place, Catherine was nice enough to just screenshot a sample pay stub. This person works at some corporation, very generic, and there's her name there. So you want to verify that all your personal information is correct. Then you see the job title, social, and pay period. You next want to do your tax exemption to make sure that's accurately reflected from your W-4. And what we've noticed is a lot of people start their job, they get handed a W-4, and they don't really know what to put. They ask the HR person, and they go, "Well, we can't help you with that." And it's you're pretty much guessing or not sure what to put. And a lot of people will put zero because they don't want to owe the IRS money. And we don't want you to owe the IRS money either. So you can see in this case, Hope is married and put 2 federal and 2 state exemptions. So the thing to keep in mind there, y'all, is it's an inverse relationship. So the more exemptions I put down, the less money they're going to take out for taxes out of my pay. And the smaller refund check I'm going to get at the end of the year. Now, the reverse of that is if I put zero, the federal government and the state are going to take out the maximum amount they can take out throughout the year. And then I'm going to get a big old refund check, but I may have been better off putting more exemptions and getting more of that money in my pay each month. Again, we don't want you to owe. The good rule of thumb is if you get above $1,000, you may want to look at bumping up your exemptions a little bit and making sure they're accurate. We think during tax time is a really good time reminder to do that every year as your life changes and things update and evolve in your life. So just keep that in mind. And if you have kids, maybe 1,000 is minimum. You're getting a lot more than that, but just make sure it's accurate. And don't ever do exempt. I can't tell you the number of horror stories we've had about people that have done exempt for a time and then forgot to change it, and they ended up owing a bunch of money. So, pay real close attention there. The next part is your gross pay. So make sure if you're getting paid hourly that everything looks right. Make sure that if you're salaried, the numbers add up and look correct to you. And then make sure all the deductions, all the things that are coming out are correct and things that you signed up for. I'm always surprised at how many folks just don't know some of the stuff that's coming out of their paycheck. And a lot of our companies and organizations we use acronyms that we're not sure what they stand for. Get those questions answered. It's a great thing to email over to payroll or go talk to somebody in HR and say, "Hey, what is this coming out of my check?" and make sure it's accurate. And then what we're left over with, of course, is our net pay, which is what we're going to base our income. We want you to look at your monthly income. It's really important to have everything written out monthly because that's when you do your spending plan, everything is monthly, even if you don't get paid that way. We want you to calculate your monthly income, and then we're going to calculate our monthly expenses. Again, if you have any questions about income, type that up, and Catherine will definitely address it in the parking lot. So the other half of this household spending plan, right? If it's 2 sides of the coin, one side is our income, which is money we earn or money that we make that comes in, and the other side are our expenses. And when we think about expenses, we typically divide them into needs and wants. And I'd love this group, if you would, just in the chat box, to type in the 5 things that we can identify that we all need as human beings. So type in, when I say, what are your needs? Go ahead and type those into the chat box. What do we all need in today's modern society? We'll give everybody a few more minutes to type in some needs that they have in their regular expenses. And you can see there in some of the pictures we put in there some hints in here as well.
So we've got shelter, food, and transportation. Food, shelter, clothing, water, health.
Good.
Sorry, Richard.
That was great. No, that's awesome. So we'll give folks a couple more minutes.
We have guinea pigs. I approve. I approve of guinea pigs.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you. That is so sweet. So we'll give folks a couple more minutes. If anybody wants to add, I think I'm only thinking of one that we might have missed, but I'll recap it in a second. So Catherine, if you're comfortable, I'm going to go ahead and move on. I heard food, clothing, shelter, and transportation. And typically the 5th one is unfortunately not guinea pigs. I think we're going to have to add it to 6. And unfortunately, it's not health. We've seen people live without health and very unhealthy lives, unfortunately, due to no fault of their own. The 5th one is utilities, right? So if we think about in the summer in Savannah needing air, needing lights, things like this in today's modern society. And we really hit on the wants earlier. So I want you to focus on your financial goal and look for ways to work towards your financial goals after your needs are taken care of.
Yep, and we had somebody saying water, which I believe was
Yep.
utilities, and we had someone else just chime in and say education. Education's a great
Yes.
want. It's definitely something that can be at the tip top of your priorities for your wants.
You bet, you bet, and I think it's working towards a need. Water we lump in with food and utilities. That's great, depending on how you're thinking of. And unfortunately, some people do live without education. But doing this at a technical college, it's extremely important. You bet. So one of the steps that or two tools that we've provided for you in the chat box. One is the spending tracker, which is really a monthly budget for you, and you can see on the left-hand side here. Um, Going right down the list, all the categories you spend your money on, and then going from left to right. A lot of us have more than one utility, so you've got expense one there would be maybe your electric bill. Number two would be your gas bill if you had it. Number three might be water, sewer, and garbage. Number four might be your cell phone. So going across that way, you're able to put in all your categories of all your bills, and then on the right hand side, you total it up and then total it up at the bottom. So once you have your income on one side and your expenses on the other, you really know what you're working with. And if you have a deficit budget, and that means your expenses are higher than your income, don't feel bad. The job here today is not to make you feel bad about yourself. The reality is 40% of Americans live with more average expenses every month than income. And really, there are only two things we can do in that instance. One is bring in more income, and the other is reduce your expenses. And a lot of times that's not a 1 month fix. It takes over time. It takes time. But knowing that information and those numbers can really help you as you're looking for extra jobs, work, going back to school. Help knowing those numbers can really help you. The second really neat thing we put in the chat box is the what I call the fritter finder, but a way to really carry this little piece of paper with you. Some people use their phone to do this, but the goal is for a week to write down every time you pay a bill or buy a pack of gum, and you find your expenses. You see where every penny is going. Once you've done that, you compare it to what you put in your spending plan, and you may find what we call spending leaks, which we'll talk more about in a second. So the next question we've got for everybody, if Catherine is able to open the poll, is which expenses do not occur monthly? So which expenses do not occur monthly? Are they A, fixed expenses, B, fluid expenses, 3, flexible expenses, or 4, periodic expenses? So everybody click A, B, C, or D. We'll give everybody a second. And Catherine, if you'll just let me know when everybody's got their answers in.
Yep, they're off and running. We've got periodics pulling ahead with flexible catch up real quick. Up, fluid's back in the race now. Sorry, I keep my day interesting, guys. It helps. Alrighty, we'll give people just a couple more seconds and then we'll let Richard reveal the answers. So I'm going to give you guys about 5 seconds.
All right, Catherine, you want to close the poll, and then I can.
We had a pretty good split. Everyone picked something except for fixed, which is a good thing.
All right, that's awesome, you guys. Well, so the correct answer, believe it or not, is periodic expenses. So periodic expenses, the key phrase is do not occur monthly. So periodic means occasionally or periodically. And these are things, and we'll talk about them more in a second, but these are things that don't hit you every month, right? Compared to fixed and flexible. And then fluid is just totally made up as a red herring to try to distract you. So the types of expenses, you just saw the 3 major ones. The first is fixed. And what I'll say about our expenses is there are pros and cons to each. So the pro with our fixed expenses, if you do that budget that we gave you, you print that out or you put it in, you start entering all your expenses. Fixed are the easiest things to budget for. You know what your rent or your mortgage or your car payment is. They really don't change. Now, it doesn't mean they can't ever change. If I move or get a roommate or sell something or pay something off, obviously my fixed expenses can change, but they're the hardest or take the longest time to change. they're pretty well fixed, right? It's in the name. The next type of expense are the opposite. These are our flexible expenses. So the nice thing about these can change all the time. We have the most control over these. During this pandemic, a lot of these have been impacted as far as what we spend our money on has been reduced in some places and gone way up in others. But the nice thing about the fixed expenses is the flexible expenses is we have the most control over these. The downside is this is where a lot of spending leaks happen. I mentioned those earlier. So spending leaks, let's say, I don't know if you've ever had a leaky faucet before, but if you have, you leave the room, like if you're in the room, drip, 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 it's annoying. You leave the room, you kind of forget about it. Well, they've done studies that leaky faucets can leak up to 5 to 10 gallons of water a day. It's the same thing with my money. If I spend $1.50 on a cup of coffee every day, that's no big deal, right? $1.50 in today's world is not a ton of money. But if I do that 5 days a week, that's $360 a year I'm spending on a cup of Joe. So the flexible expenses, the downside is we can leak a lot of those expenses out and not pay attention to them. The third category are what was on the quiz question there, the periodic expenses that happen occasionally. The great thing about these is they're not hitting us every month. For most of us, we're not having a holiday every month. Hopefully our car's not breaking down every month. But when these things happen, they tend to burst the budget. This is why I'm a big fan of having a holiday account at your bank or your credit union. So you can kind of put the money in there all year at no extra charge and then forget about it. And then when it comes time for the holidays, you've got it in there and you don't have to go into debt to achieve it. So that the periodic expenses, the great thing is they don't hit us every month. The hard thing is if we don't budget for these, we really still need to budget because they're coming, right? If we got a car, it's going to need repairs. If you celebrate the holidays, they didn't move Christmas this year. It's still December 25th. So we've got to prepare for these things and build them into that household spending plan. So for example, if I spent, $500 last year on all the holidays, birthdays, and everything throughout the year, I need to put aside $42 every month. So when those things come around, I've got money. Awesome. So moving on into savings, the first thing we got to do to save, and this is really tricky, is to have a balanced budget. And the definition of a balanced budget is that you've got more or equal income than you do your expenses. So that's where we need to start and focus. I really encourage people to start small. I mean, somebody at the beginning brought up a great financial goal of having 6 months worth of expenses into a savings account. That is awesome. If you're close to that or want to achieve that, that's amazing. But I will tell you, for most people, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, that sounds like something that's just might as well be on Jupiter. And so we've got to start with something really small. So if I can say, hey, I'd like to have $100 in a savings account that I don't touch, and I achieve that, that can be really meaningful because then I'm more likely to get 300, 500, 1,000, a paycheck, a month's worth, right? You can see how that stuff adds up. So something is better than nothing is the rule of thumb there. And then make it automatic. You guys know, I mean, we can go on our phones right now and spend so much money with a couple of clicks of a button, but it is nearly impossible to save money. Don't forget to automate your savings. So set an amount that comes out every month that you don't touch and then let it grow, right? Leave it alone. We've had some great sharings from these workshops where one person said they set up an online savings account where the money went in automatically, but to get it out, they didn't have any other access other than requesting it, and they send them a check that would take 3 or 4 days. So they had to know it was a real emergency. Some people sever the link between their checking and savings account. So when they put their ATM card, it doesn't ask checking your savings. They had to go in to get the saving money out of savings. And that alone allowed them to start letting that money grow that they had put in there. Finally, we had one person that had a checking account in a very convenient place with an ATM and debit card to it. And then they put their savings account all the way across town. It wasn't convenient for them. They didn't have an ATM or debit card. The money went in there automatically, but it was really a drag to get it out. So these little tricks, right, can be very helpful into getting us achieve our financial goal. Most of the time we think, oh, I'm going to have to change my whole life to do this. The reality is it's these small things that add up over time. So we've got a really fun example here of the time value of money. And the reason we do this is we want to show you the power of compounding interest. We're going to play a little bit with technology. I'm going to give you examples of 3 different people. So there's going to be person A, person B, and person C. And we're going to assume that they didn't just put their money in a savings account that earned 0.01%, that maybe they put their money in an index fund. So it just tracked the NASDAQ or one of these other indexes out there. And they got a 10% return. And this is not an investing class. I'm not going to throw a bunch of numbers at you without explaining them. But what they did, and we're going to fast forward and rewind time, they put the money in there and they didn't touch it, right? And they got a 10% return. And we didn't make that number up. Historically, the stock market is between 8 and 12%. So we just chose the 10% right in the middle. So those are the assumptions we're making with this time value of money exercise. But we're going to start with person A. And I just dropped a bunch of numbers on there, even though I said I wouldn't, but I told you I was going to explain it. So person A started at the age of 18. And every summer or during the school year, they worked. So all through college, and then one more year, they worked. And maybe their expenses were low because they were living at home, or they saved a bunch of money. They maybe were on a scholarship and didn't have a ton of expenses. And so they were able to save $250 a month. That's $3,000 a year for 5 years. That's $15,000 that they had put in by age 22. And then they never touched it again. We fast forward many, many years for that person to age 65. So they never put anything more than the 15 out and never pulled out any of that money. Now, we chose age 65 for a reason. The reason is that is when most people retire, because that's when Medicare kicks in, the health insurance provider that's low cost through the government. So we chose that amount. If you can see at the bottom of your screen, person A actually became a millionaire. They have $1.2 million by just putting in $15,000 earlier in their life, never touching it, and then going to retire at age 65. Now, person B had a little bit of a different situation. Let's say they went to college and had to, maybe they didn't get a scholarship or had higher expenses. Maybe they weren't working while they were in school. Maybe they went to graduate school. So at age 28, they enter the working world. They start putting this $3,000 in, and they do it for 10 years. So twice as much time, twice as much money, $3,000 a year for 10 years. But then they never put the money in again, never take it out. Fast forward many years from now, that person's not a millionaire, but at age 65, they've got $750,000 in there. Not bad, right? The last person is like most Americans. This person wakes up and has been working, hasn't saved any money for retirement, but then at age 38 goes, oh, I would like to stop working someday. So what they do is take $250 a month and put it towards their retirement from age 38 to age 65. They put in $84,000 over that time. That person's not a millionaire. They don't have $750,000, but they still have almost $500,000 in retirement. Not a millionaire, but nothing to sneeze at. Now, the funny thing is, when I show this to people that are over a certain age, they go, man, I wish somebody would have shown me this when I was younger. When I show this to people that are younger, on the younger end of the spectrum, they go, I'm going to be a millionaire way before age 65. So I always find that funny, people's perception of it. So take a look at this time value of money. Hopefully the takeaways are: start early, do what you can, don't touch it, right? And something is better than nothing. Again, there's a recap. The first person, 15,000 in, over $1 million at 65. Number two, twice as much in, not a millionaire, but 3/4. And then the last person, 84,000, a little under $500,000. Or yeah, $500,000. So we want to ask you another quiz question. I think this is our third and final quiz question. What should be your first step to becoming debt-free? We had that as our number one financial goal for somebody. So if Catherine will open the poll, should it be A, stop using your credit, B, pay the debt with the lowest interest. C, pay the debt with the lowest balance. Or D, call your creditors. What should be your first step to becoming debt free? Give everybody a second to answer that question.
Alrighty, so we've got stop using credit, it's taken the lead, followed by paying the debt with the lowest balance. We've got pay the debt with the lowest interest, because none of these are bad options. We're just asking you what you think is the best. Alrighty, we're going to give people about 3 more seconds. Let the last couple people click in, and we will let Richard take it away.
Awesome. So let's unveil the answer, but first I want to say Catherine's exactly right. It's not, this one's tricky, y'all, because we're not asking you, are these good steps? Because they all are. It's actually, what's the first step? And the first step is to stop using credit. If you've ever heard the expression, stop the bleeding, that's what we have to use that approach when it comes to debt. We don't want to make it any worse before we start solving the issues that are going on with it. And the best way we can do that is stop using credit. So example, credit cards, medical bills, collection accounts, car loans, mortgages, student loans, rent to own, finance companies, title loans. These are all debts that we can get into. But if I want to reduce my credit card debt, the first thing I've got to do is stop pulling it out of my purse or wallet and stop clicking on my favorite online accounts. I've got to stop using credit. So dealing with debt, and debt is a 4-letter word. Yes, it's what we specialize with at Consumer Credit Counseling Service. You can come in for a review that's free to you to talk through options. But here we're just going to give you some tips when it comes to debt. And we want to start with student loans. You may have forgotten or not realized or seen last year that student loans surpassed credit card debts as as far as the highest unsecured debt in our country. And I want to specifically talk about federal student loans that work a little differently than private student loans. With federal student loans, we definitely encourage you, if it makes sense, to look into consolidation. So getting all those loans refinanced into one, especially if you've been past due or in a negative account standing, those can put you in a positive account standing. The next thing is apply for and consider income-driven or income-based repayment. These are plans to pay off your student loans debt in 10 to 15 years by capping your monthly payment at 10 to 15% of your income, so it can make it affordable, but you're actually chipping away at it. We know right now they're offering forbearances. Make sure you're communicating about that. Usually defer, they're great while you're in school, but we don't recommend them when you get out for most people because it's just making that interest and balance go up and up. Finally, if you're eligible, make sure you apply for public service loan, student loan forgiveness, depending on the type of work that you do. There's a lot of misinformation about this program. I believe it was last year, a lot of people who thought they were getting it were not getting it. They have to be qualifying payments every month, so you need to make sure whatever plan you're on that you're getting qualifying payments. And so we've got a couple of really good websites for you. These links will be in the PDF presentation, but if you want to jot down, the first is the CFPB site. What I like about this one, y'all, is you can go in and put in your type of loan, whether it's federal, public, or private, put that information in there, and then it'll link you to the site. And then the site below it is the federal site where you can actually put in your specific loan number, and it'll give you options. Because one of the things we've heard from a lot of student loan folks that have student loans is, well, I call my servicer and I get very different answers, and they tend to want to put me into a deferment or something that I don't think I want. And so we want you to be educated about this before you talk to your servicer.
And both of those links are in the chat box if someone's not able to get them out of there.
Perfect. Thank you, Catherine. So the next thing we want to talk about is credit cards. Yes, this little piece of plastic that we were joking about earlier, plastic surgery can cause a lot of problems. The number one thing I'll say is if you've got a credit card and you carry a balance on it, is to stop using that card until you can get it paid off. If you were in the credit workshop last week, we talked about how important that could be to boost your credit score, but also not carrying a balance. They used to tell you, oh, carry a balance, it'll boost your score. That is not true now, the recent scoring model. So there's no reason to carry a balance on a credit card. At its best, it's a 30-day interest-free loan. At its worst, it's unmanageable debt, and you end up paying a lot more for the item that you purchase on a credit card. So the first thing I would say is if you can put an extra $25 or $50 a month until you're paid off with that card, as long as you're not using it, that'll help both your debt situation and your credit score. The other site I love sharing with people, it is the ugliest website in the world, but it's free. It's run by Utah State's Cooperative Extension. You go in, you put in your email address, create a password. This is for if you have multiple credit cards. It could be really helpful to do this website, powerpay.org. And a lot of people, y'all, have called that snowballing or waterfalling, but PowerPay is where you have multiple cards, and you pay the minimum on 4 of the cards, but put extra, maybe that extra $25 or $50 I mentioned, for one card at a time on top of the minimum until that card is paid off. And then you roll it over to the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. So the whole time you're paying the same amount, but by the time you get down to that last debt, it's just coming down in chunks. You're putting all of what you were putting on before. And that can be a really great strategy. It's free. You don't need to pay anybody to do that. It could be very helpful for you. It does take time, and you got to stop using the credit. One of the questions I get is, do I start with the lowest balance, or do I start with the highest interest rate? By the math, they suggest starting with the highest interest rate card. It'll save you the most money over the long run, but we're not going to be mad at you if you have a low balance and you just want to knock one out. That totally, it feels better, right, to just knock one out. That's totally acceptable. So if you come see us, one of the options we'll talk about is a debt management plan or a debt consolidation plan. It's not a loan. We offer it at Consumer Credit, charge a monthly fee to help get your cards paid off over 2 to 5 years. The benefit really is you're reducing your interest rate and fee, and you have a target date for when you're debt free. And this has happened recently. A lot of creditors, a lot of the major credit card companies, if you reach out to them, they do offer internal hardship plans above and beyond what they're doing right now with the COVID-19 epidemic. Is letting people, that's kind of a temporary forbearance. An internal hardship plan is like a debt management, but it's one-on-one with a creditor. The last type of debt I want to talk about is medical bills. The biggest thing I can say with medical bills is make sure if you have insurance that it's processed correctly through insurance. It involves a lot of back and forth between the provider. You guys know how it is. You go in, let's say you go to the hospital and you go in and you got one hospital bill, but then you've got the radiology bill, the blood work bill, the guy that was sweeping the floor that walked by sent you a separate bill, so you get out and you got all these different bills, and it can be overwhelming and confusing. Just make sure with each one, if you have insurance, it was processed correctly. If there's an amount still owed or you don't have insurance, certainly with the hospital, apply for a financial hardship. All 3 of our hospitals here in Savannah do offer this. They don't advertise it very well, but if you go to their site, it's and you can actually Google the name of the hospital and then financial hardship. You can get the paperwork or talk to a financial counselor there and get that applied for and see if they'll write the debt off. The next thing is if there's an amount left over, see if they'll discount that amount. Some places will offer a prompt pay discount. So if I agree to pay it off in a amount of time, they'll discount it, or they'll forgive part of the amount owed. And then finally, try to get on a payment plan once you've exhausted all that other thing. Most of them want you to be paid out in 24 months. Just part of it is if that's not affordable for you, see what it takes in order to avoid it going to a collection account status. So we covered a lot today. We went through SMARTs, and we gave you the resource to do that. We reviewed a pay stub and talked about some tips on increasing your income through that, your spending plan, how to track your expenses, and a tool there, writing down your budget. Went through some tips on saving and the time value of money, and talked about debt, the 4-letter word, and some solutions to some popular types of debt. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer those now. We're coming up on an hour, so if anybody needs to hop off, it will not hurt our feelings, but happy to stay a little bit extra and answer questions. Catherine, if we've got them, let me know.
Yeah, one of the questions that was asked in the chat was whenever we did the question about which income you should use for a spending plan, they asked what the difference between A and D were, which was gross income and salary. And so I just let them know that the gross income, hourly wage, and salary are all the same in terms of it's how much you're paid for the work you're doing before they take out anything. So I just want
That's
to make
right.
sure that for anyone that's on the phone not seeing the chats, that they got that one. That was so that we could discuss, hey, these all mean the same thing.
Yep, that's great. And we really want to focus on net when we're working on our spending plan personally. Good. Any other questions?
So one of them was, do you send us copies of the slides and tools? And so they are in the, if you go to the content option, they're actually all shared files that are in there. And the video should be shared with the attendees. That would be a great question for Brent. I believe they will be, but that will be a question for Dr. Stubbs. I believe last time it was, and I believe he's going to send it out to anyone who has signed up for it.
That is absolutely correct. Everyone here, everyone who signed up who couldn't make it will get a copy of this presentation.
Any other questions, Catherine, before we ask Dr. Stubbs to wrap up for us?
Those are the ones that have come in. I'm glad you guys think our tools would be super helpful. Please feel free to download them. If you've got other questions, you can always call and set up an appointment with us. We'd be more than happy to sit down and talk with you guys.
Awesome.
Well, again, as you can see, there's a reason why they're developing Hall of Fame careers in financial education. And you guys were fantastic. Thank you, everyone who joined us today. And thank you who are watching this maybe later, sometime at night. Finances keep us up late sometimes out of fear. A great thing to do would be to watch something like this and start to develop some smart goals and start to see that future ahead of yourselves. Everyone be well and be safe. Thank you, Richard, Catherine.
Thank you, Brent. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.